My professional life got accelerated because of Airbnb. It's like I got a ticket on a rocket ship and I had to just hold on.
Why did it become such a big thing?
When we started Airbnb, no one wanted to invest in this business. And I felt like a failure. I felt like I was the captain of this ship and a torpedo hit the side of the ship.
What's the most interesting thing you've learned from Warren Buffett?
No one wants to get rich slow.
Hey family, it's Carlos Watson. Welcome back. Have a fantastic show for you today. Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb, maybe one of the most interesting entrepreneurs in the world, maybe one of the most innovative people out there. Go ahead and enjoy. Hey Brian.
Hey, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good, yeah. Are you getting any sleep or are you busier than ever?
No, I struggle to shut my mind off.
Right.
I'm a very high energy person, and the last 18 months has been a giant adrenaline rush. So, but I am slowing down a little bit, like now it's summer and, we're kind of a little bit post-crisis. So I'm trying to restart the rest of my life, because this has been basically 18 months of kind of crisis management / 24/7.
Did you come to any kind of bright new forks in the road or any kind of...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Personal and professional. Starting with professional, and just like when the crisis hit, I'll just give you a short version of what happened professionally.
Right.
Probably like a lot of people, I thought my life was going all right in 2020. I came back from the holidays and I thought, this is my life. I got a plan, I'm going. And all of a sudden I felt like I was the captain of this ship and a torpedo hit the side of the ship. We had business that did more than $30 billion annualized in bookings. And then all of a sudden, in 8 weeks, we lost 80% of the business. And people were predicting very terrible things, like the company wouldn't survive. And I had to stare into the abyss. And thankfully, I've never had a near-death experience, though the way it's described to me is when your life, you have a near-death experience, your life flashes before your eyes.
Right.
Well, our business flashed before our eyes.
Wow. And
when the business flashed before my eyes, we had clarity. And it became very clear to me that we needed to get back to our roots, get back to the original idea of Airbnb, the idea of bringing people together. And that became this organizing idea that I think one day at a time we used to rebuild the company back from what felt like the ashes, the smoldering embers of the home. And all of a sudden we rebuilt Airbnb stronger than before. And of course, then went public and all obviously worked out. But at the same time, I had a personal reevaluation. And my personal reevaluation is that you tend to yearn for things when they're gone. You tend to appreciate something when it's taken away from you. And what was taken away from me was what was taken away from many of us: human connection, our friends, our family. And I said to myself that when this thing is all over, I'm not going to take for granted the relationships I have in my life.
Could you see yourself, taking time off, maybe getting married, raising a family?
Yeah. That was all part of it. Yeah. I'm 39 years old. And, I kind of lived this dual life, right? Like my professional life and my personal life. And Airbnb is a pretty big company. We have 900 million guest arrivals, just to give you a sense of it. The business, we've handled more than $110 billion through the platform. So professionally, as I said, I'm 39 going on 49 or 59. My professional life got accelerated because of Airbnb. It's like I got a ticket on a rocket ship and I had to just hold on. At the same time, because Airbnb was so all-encompassing, some of my personal life may have been a little bit on hold, and that's the bargain that I made, but it's also something I said I wasn't going to do forever.
Our home is the training ground for her dreams policy. Insure carefully. Dream fearlessly.
Who have you actually gotten something good from, whether it's on a heavy topic or a light topic or a obvious topic or historical topic? Who's in your kind of thinker cabinet?
A year ago, I actually brought on our team, Jonathan Ive, who was formerly at Apple. He now has a consulting firm love from, and we're one of the clients, but he was a really helpful mentor and advisor throughout the pandemic because he was with Steve Jobs and they had a lot of kind of near-death experiences, and he's really helped me think about the power of design to really, I think, change the world. I have a close relationship with the former President Obama, and we talk a lot about the responsibility of business in the 21st century. But I've also had the good fortune of knowing Warren Buffett really well, who's probably the most important investor, of the last few generations.
What's the most interesting thing you've learned from Warren Buffett?
I had the good fortune of going to this conference, and I'm sitting at a picnic table with him and Jeff Bezos, and I was just getting involved in tech, so I was very starstruck and kind of nervous. But Warren said, "Yeah, join us for this lunch," and I asked Jeff Bezos, because Bezos said that Warren Buffett was his mentor or a mentor of his. And I asked him, I said, "What's the best advice Warren Buffett ever gave you?" So I'll tell you I'll give you that advice. And Jeff Bezos said a story. He said, "Warren, one day I called him up and I said, 'You're one of the wealthiest guys in the world and your investment thesis is so simple. Why doesn't anyone copy you?' And Warren Buffett's answer is because no one wants to get rich slow." One of the big lessons in life is just sticking to something. When we started Airbnb, no one wanted to invest in this business. And I felt like a failure, for so many days. We'd wake up and it was small, it wasn't growing. And a sane person probably would have quit. But we kept going, through obscurity, through rejection. We couldn't raise money. But over time, it started growing. And it went kind of from this to this. And so I think the big lesson there is, again, you can overestimate what you can do in a short period of time. But if you stick with something, then all the gains are in the outside years, and you've got to think really, really long term. And so that was the lesson to me.
Why do you think you didn't give up?
Well, I'll do a quick 20-second on the story of Airbnb. I wasn't intending to start Airbnb with my friend. It was kind of by accident. I had just moved to San Francisco, and I moved in with my roommate from college, Joe. We're two designers. I'm totally broke. I had $1,000 savings. I don't know if that's broke, but not wealthy, $1,000 in the bank. And then Joe tells me my rent check is due, and it's $1,150. So I have a basic math problem. And so it turns out that weekend that I just moved to San Francisco, an international design conference was coming to San Francisco, and all the hotels in San Francisco were sold out. And that's when we had an idea. We said, well, what if we just turned our house into a bed and breakfast for the design conference? Unfortunately, I didn't have any beds, but Joe had 3 air beds. We pulled the air beds out of the closet, and we inflated them, and we called it airbedandbreakfast.com. And we ended up hosting 3 people that weekend, a 35-year-old woman from Boston, a 30-year-old from India, a 45-year-old father from Utah. And we made enough money to pay our rent. But more importantly, something else happened. We actually had 3 people live with us for a week. And when people live with you for that period of time, something magical happens, right? You become friends. A multi-year relationship can get condensed into a short period of time. And the reason I tell you that story is because years later, after Airbnb finally did work, people ask me, why didn't you give up? And the answer I've always given is I said that if people could experience what I experienced that first weekend, then I knew that this would be an idea that would spread around the world. I had this deeply personal experience, my roommate and I, that we got to make money and get paid to meet really cool people. And if more people could experience this would be an idea that would spread.
Your boy Ron Conway years ago told me when Twitter was actually doing super well, I asked him, which of his investments are you most excited about? He obviously leaned into your boy Zuckerberg a little bit, but he said, I actually am most excited about Airbnb. And I said, why? And he says, I think the opportunity is as big as many superstar founders as you have. And he said, those guys have 3, whereas most companies I have 1 or 2. Was he right? And was there some special chemistry in the founders?
I was lucky that I found 2 co-founders, 2 partners, and we could trust each other intrinsically. We complemented each other's skills. And I think the answer to your question is it absolutely was critical.
Talk to me a little bit about you growing up. If I had met you at 14, 15, 16, who would I have met?
So I'm from upstate New York. My parents are social workers. So I had no idea what I wanted to be growing up. I never thought about being an entrepreneur. I was really into sports and athletics, but so I went to this private school. But what I was really passionate about was art and design. But at that age, I probably was like a lot of 14, 15-year-olds. I had a passion, but never really thought I could get paid to pursue that passion. And then my life changed when I was 16. I transferred to a public high school, and I had a teacher. She told me she thought I could be a great artist and designer. And I ended up getting a scholarship, one of the few in the country, to go to the Rhode Island School of Design, which is a design school. Still never thought I would run a tech company, right? Like, how would you possibly ever imagine? I thought I'd be a designer. But, each step of the way, every one of those life experiences, I could never have seen it looking backwards, but every one of them really helped lead to where I got to, And it was all this kind of curious journey of just having faith that one thing would lead to the other, and all of my cumulative life experiences would all come back to me.
Brian, we talk a lot on this show about dreaming fearlessly. What advice would you give people who are trying to realize maybe their wildest dreams, their grandest dreams?
My general advice is I'm pretty shameless. When I was a kid, I used to be afraid to ask people for advice. Because one, I was afraid they would say no and reject me. And two, I was afraid I would seem stupid and wouldn't know anything. And what I learned is that if, as a young person, you can be shameless, maybe you can't talk to some of the people I talk to, but you can talk to somebody 2 or 3 years ahead of you, then, you'll learn so much more. It's like a fast track to learning. And it just takes, I think, a little bit of nerve. I kind of think of it as being a little bit shameless. If you want to learn as much as you can about a subject, the most efficient thing to do isn't to read everything about it. It's to go as quickly as possible to what you think the definitive source is. And sometimes they're people, sometimes they might be people in your life, and you go right to them. And what I found is that most people are willing to give you advice because it kind of makes them feel good. It kind of is a giant ego stroke, right? And it feels good when people want your advice. And so rejection is pretty unusual in the advice category. People are pretty usually willing to help.
I want to wrap up a little bit and talk about last summer. We had probably the most significant racial conversation in the country. Where did it leave you, given that it was obviously a national and international conversation?
I learned and I took away so much. I'll say 2 things. The first thing I'll say is I think it was, obviously about time that we had a conversation of that scale. And I think that it's pretty clear more than 1 year later that those conversations have probably only begun and that they need to continue. Albert Einstein once said one of the most powerful forces in the universe is compound growth. If you want to have change, you need compound growth of the change. It must accumulate beyond a week or 2 of protest. We have to sustain the energy when the cameras are turned off. But I will say that I think as leaders, it's incumbent on us not just to focus our attention in a crisis and move on. We have to have this quiet momentum. We had major discrimination problems on the platform. We still do, actually. In 2016, or maybe it was 2017, there was a hashtag on Twitter, and the hashtag was Airbnb while black. And it wasn't a good hashtag. It was basically describing the disparate impact of people of color on Airbnb who were experiencing racism and systemic bias. And so, we realized we had to address this, but addressing it wasn't doing something for 3 weeks and moving on. So we've been working on this for 4 or 5 years. And last year we worked with Color of Change and a number of other groups to do a first of its kind project called Project Lighthouse.
So Airbnb has partnered with leading civil rights groups and privacy experts to create entirely new processes,
where our goal is to measure systemic bias on the platform.
By pinpointing when discrimination might be happening, we can work together to put a stop to it.
I, as a CEO of Airbnb, there's not a ton I can do on certain issues, but there's a whole lot I can do to make sure that inside the gates of Airbnb, we're doing what we can to root out discrimination. So that would be the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is maybe at a larger point. And as I've traveled the world, gone to hundreds of cities, met thousands of people, lived in their homes, 2 unmistakable lessons I've taken away. The first is people are fundamentally good. Now, I know that you can read the newspaper and news and convince yourself people aren't good. I think it was Chief Justice Warren that said, I read the sports section, not the front page. The sports section is filled with man's successes. The front page is filled with man's failures. It turns out that despite all that we read in the news, most people are good. And if it wasn't true, Airbnb would be out of business. We would be out of business. We wouldn't be able to run our business if strangers, in the end, couldn't behave well and trust each other. I'm not saying it works all the time, but it mostly works. And the reason why is for the second principle I've learned, that despite our differences, we are 99% the same. Statistically, we are genetically 99.9% the same, I think. And so I think we spend a lot of time focusing on the 1% or the 0.1% that makes us different. And a lot of those differences should be acknowledged, celebrated, embraced. But we also, at some point, need to recognize our commonality.
Brian, I want to finish with what I call rapid fire. It's kind of the sports page. Say this knowing that you've had dinner with many interesting people already. Who would you love to have dinner with?
Like Leonardo da Vinci.
Nice. Your karaoke song?
This is embarrassing, but Backstreet Boys, Everybody. It's all about the dancing for me. I got terrible singing voice, so that 90s boy band, that's where the magic comes out.
I love that. If someone was going to play you in a movie, who should play you in the movie?
Rick Moranis.
Oh, baby. Did not expect that, but that's good. Your favorite movie?
Whiplash, maybe, after the last year I've been through.
Okay, all right. Your favorite book or magazine?
I just got Van Gogh's Letters.
Nice.
I'm a big artist, and so that's the one I'll pick.
Most beautiful place you've ever been to in this world?
Utah, around the Grand Canyon.
All right, most stunning Airbnb you've ever seen?
I stayed in an Airbnb in Australia that's called the Pole House because it was suspended over a cliff with a steel pole, and it was this glass house. It was overlooking an ocean.
Brian, this was so much fun. I appreciate who you are and what you're doing. That systemic bias thing you're doing, game changer for doing that.
We're working on it. Thank you very much, Carlos. Good to see you today.
I thoroughly enjoyed that. Well, here's what I'll say. He's my favorite business person we've had.
Wow.
I just found him to be a very interesting individual, very deep and thoughtful. It's encouraging to have someone with that depth run such a large company. Oh, and I love the Leonardo da Vinci. That was really very cool.
Compounding growth, obviously from an investment perspective, but from a career perspective, I never really never put that one together. That like your career kind of snowballs and it's really hard there at the beginning and you don't feel like you're making any progress, but if you stick to it, you'll start to see real gains.
He actually reminded me a lot of our DoorDash CEO, Tony.
Oh, Tony. Oh, interesting.
Young, sharp, bright, and not to mention his idea made me a lot of money. So I like to thank him very much.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Brian. What an interesting guy. Unlikely entrepreneur in many ways, unlikely CEO, but I love what he talked about in terms of intentionality. Really love the fact that his parents are social workers. We didn't go into that too much, but that's kind of an unlikely start. And I really appreciate some of the things he's doing with the company. I like what he said about measuring systemic bias. It's the kind of thing that feels difficult and amorphous, but it would be a game changer if they get this right. Even if they're not perfect, it could be a game changer, set a model for lots of other people. Really important progress. All right, like that, I gotta go, but I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Carlos Watson Show. Remember, there's more where this good stuff came from. Every weekday, a new episode. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Also enjoy our podcast. Be safe and be well. I'll see you on the other side.